Ladies and gentlemen, I could do a big announcement, but I don't think he needs any introduction. Please welcome Geoff Downes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll just give you a little bit of info on what's going to be happening here for the next 45, 50 minutes. I'm going to play one piece which is a brand new piece. It's a continuous piece which I've just written. It's called The Bridge. It's got a lot of different segments. Everything you hear that we're doing tonight is actually going to be generated by these two computers that we've got here. Andy Thomas is firing the Greenware system, which is a PC, and I'm going to be using an Apple Mac, which is going to accompany me on playing pretty well through this first piece. So it's called The Bridge. Thank you very much. I hope you like some of the moods in there. It's shifted a lot around various styles. As I say, everything that you heard there was actually being generated by virtual keyboards in the computer. So there's no real instruments as such. Everything is a virtual synth. I was actually running my computer there to pretty much the top of its range with about 30 various virtual instruments. We're going to take a couple of minutes whilst we reconfigure the computers, and then I'm going to do a little spot which reflects the historical side of my career, and I hope you remember some of the songs that we're going to do. Okay. This is part 2.
I heard you on the wire back in 52, lying awake intently tuning in on you. If I was young, it didn't stop you coming through.
Thank you very much. You've probably seen this gentleman, Dallas, walking about with a microphone, padding around very carefully. He's actually doing an ambient or a binaural recording of this show, so that's why he's wandering around in a pair of socks and very stealthily recording this. I'm going to carry on with something from Yes now, when I was with the band in 1980, and this is called Tempus Fugit. Thank you very much. From the same album, there was another song. That's called, it was a keyboard piece, and it's called Man in the White Car.
You're leaving now. It's in your eyes. There's no disguising it. It really comes as no surprise to find out you planned it all along. I see it now. Becomes so clear. Your insincerity and be all starry-eyed. You think that I would have known, but now sure as the sun across the sky, this light is over. Like the tears that used to die. The thing is sure, the time will tell if you were wrong. The brightest green around the world will touch you when I die. Sure as the sun across the sky, this light is over. Lost like the tears that used to die. You're leaving now. It's in your eyes. There's no disguising it. It really comes as no surprise. Now that you planned it all along. The thing is sure, the time will tell. You were wrong. Brightest
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll just explain a little bit behind that particular recording. We were actually running a stereo mix from our recent concert that we did in live in America of a well-known song there, and we actually muted all the keyboard information, so I was performing a live keyboard with the original backing track that the other guys did live. So that was one way of. These are all slightly different slants on pieces. Some of them are MIDI files that we've put together. Some of them are actual stereo audio recordings that we've actually added to. Some of them are completely solo works. So I'm going to carry on with the solo mode from the original album, and it's a piece called Bolero from the end of Cutting It Fine, and this has got no computers, all on piano. Thank you. I'm going to carry on now with another piece when John joined the band, John Payne. This was actually an instrumental piece from the album Aqua. The track's called Aqua. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure playing for you, and hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. And of course, Andy Thomas. And Dallas Simpson. And John Payne on the lenses.
I'm sitting here with Geoff Downes, and we're talking about the latest in the Armada releases, a live recording made at a church in London back in April of 2003. So, Geoff, tell me how that whole recording came together and where the ideas came from.
Well, I could actually turn the clock back about 17 years when I did my first solo album, which was the Light Program. And I went to see Rob Dickens at Warner Records at the time. It was actually on Geffen, but Geffen used to go through Warner's in the UK. And he had this idea about putting on this one-man show with all my keyboards at the planetarium, which is actually significantly about 150 yards from where the actual church was that I did the one-man show 17 years later. So it was something that had been around for quite some time, thinking-wise, but I never really had the chance to actually put it together and do specifically a one-man show. So unfortunately, I had a call from a guy called Mark Jenkins, who runs a company called Amp Music. He writes a keyboard magazine in the UK, and or keyboard player magazine, should I say. And he asked me if I wanted to do one of these one-man shows at the church in London, St Cyprian's. So I got my thinking cap on and put together a new piece. And then I thought it'd be nice to do two sides of my career, if you like, which was one was a brand new piece, and the other one was snippets of songs that I'd done throughout my career.
I thought it was interesting that you chose to do it in a church because if I remember correctly, you're classically trained in playing piano, and this would not be the first time that you've played in a church.
No, I mean, my whole background is really in English church music, and that was another reason why I was particularly felt inspired by this prospect. Was my father was a church organist. I was singing in choirs when I was 6, and I went on to be a chorister, and the church music was very much part of my life when I was growing up. So it was a nice return to that environment, if you like, albeit in an electronic sense as opposed to the sort of classical English choral music.
If I remember correctly from one of the Asia videos, there was actually a church that was featured in a little snippet about you that, if memory serves, a relative of yours helped construct this church or worked in this church or something like that?
Well, that's right. I mean, my family comes from just outside Manchester in Cheshire, and it was a little village there where my family actually are from, and it's only got a pub and a parish church and a few houses. It's that kind of a place, and the sort of our ancestors go back 600 or 700 years, and they're all buried at this church. So it's when we did the Asia in Asia thing, I think the people at MTV, I told them about this background of mine, that I could pinpoint. In fact, the founder of my school, one of the founders, was actually called Geoffrey Downes. So
How unusual.
and my school was actually founded in 1487. So it was quite an interesting feature, I think, that they did at that time, and I got to play the organ in the church, which my father used to play. So that sort of area around South Manchester was where I grew up.
Well, as you mentioned, the performance itself consisted basically of two halves. The first one being a piece that, it's my understanding, you composed specifically for this event.
That's correct. I actually came about. I really started getting into using virtual synths on computers, and I've always been very interested in computers in music. But this specifically was, I wanted to construct a piece that I'd started to write once I'd really got into all these plugins on and soft synths on computers, and it was like a sort of collage of a lot of ideas that I'd used to experiment with these various modules, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to demonstrate that as much as anything else at the show when I did it.
When you were touring with Asia, doing the Aura tour, the tour in support of the Aura album, you were performing as part of your solo section something that you were calling Euroglide at that point. Is that
Electroglide? It was called.
Electroglide? Excuse me.
Yeah.
Is that did that piece manifest itself in the bridge, or is that entirely separate?
No, that was an entirely separate thing. I think that I've always had it's always nice to be able to have a solo spot in the Asia shows. It's something that I've always done, even back into the early days. We all used to take a solo in those days. So it was really just I tend to kind of craft one for one tour, and then I'll work on another section for another tour. So I kind of build up solo pieces for specific tours. But I think that going back to the solo concert, I was really wanted to do something that I'd never ever performed at all, and no elements of it before.
So it was a completely unique piece.
Absolutely brand new, yeah.
The second half of the performance had tastes of music that you created throughout your career. Starting with the Buggles, there was some Yes pieces that probably haven't seen live performance in many, many years, if ever. And then, of course, spectrum of the Asia music that you've been involved in. So with such a massive catalog to choose from, how did you make the choices that you did?
I think probably what I did was I generally picked what I thought were the most significant pieces from those eras, and I think certainly Tempus Fugit from the Yes period. I mean, albeit me only being in Yes for a fairly short period of time, a lot of people still say, I really love Drama. Tempus Fugit, great track, and that kind of inspired me. I thought, well, that'd be nice to do that, because I know that Yes haven't played that probably since the days of
that you toured with them.
When we toured with them, yeah. And of course, Man in a White Car, which I did on a solo album as well on Vox Humana. So I wanted to effectively show a different slant on those pieces as well. I mean, obviously, Video Killed the Radio Star was was my sort of thing that really launched my career. So I felt that was significant to do that as well.
I mean, Video Killed the Radio Star has been part of your live repertoires for many years. It was interesting to see that this particular performance, you decided to put backing vocals with it. Where did those vocals come from?
Well, I was actually putting the whole show together with a guy called Andy Thomas, friend of mine from Wales. He was doing a lot of the PC stuff. Anyway, we were looking at the sequence that I put together of video, and in the absence of the original vocals, which obviously are on some multi-track somewhere in the middle of nowhere, I don't know. But carrying on with the church connection, he had this friend of his who lived just around the corner, who was actually the vicar's wife, a lady called Sally Marsden. So we actually got her to do the just some chorus vocals on it, and the whoa whoa oh. So actually also used John Payne's vocal, which he put on a demo, which was heavily treated, and
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So the whole thing had a kind of cyclical connection all round, really.
Well, there was also several Asia tracks that were chosen for the performance. And I remember specifically seeing you perform the Bolero section from Cutting It Fine in Stuttgart on the Aura tour when there was a piano available there. And it was an amazing rendition. And that was reborn in this performance. Well, that's a lesser known Asia track, I think. And what made you decide to play that classical piece?
Well, I think that in previous incarnations of Asia, I had actually used the Bolero section at times, and I think in many ways it was a piece that was quite dear to me from the first album, because it was very much me exposed, and the other guys were very keen to have that exposure on the first album for me on a solo section, and I think that was something that I always appreciated, and I've kind of, they gave me the space to be able to create a piece on that first album, and performing it live was something that I felt, it was nice to take it onto the piano. It starts on the piano at the end of Cutting It Fine on the record, so I've always use that piece as a kind of something that was me in Asia, if you like.
I think that it was wonderful how the entire performance culminated in an incredible version of Free. But the thing that struck me at the end of the recording was even though I enjoyed it as much as I did, there seemed to be a lot of Asia classics that were passed over for some more recent material, and just wondering what sort of thought went into what particular piece and why. I know that we sort of talked about this a minute ago, but I'm more interested in knowing why a piece like Free as opposed to, say, Kings of the Day or something like that.
Well, I think Aura's obviously still very current album in our minds because it's our most recent studio album. So I think I felt that it was relevant to reflect on that being, if you like, the kind of the definitive album that we've done certainly since John joined in '91, since Asia became really a different band than it started out being. So I think, to me, it did kind of epitomise this era that we've had with Asia since '91. And Free, I think, is probably the most progressive track we've done since that time.
One of the questions that gets asked quite often as a result of the announcement of the release of this recording that you did was, are there any plans for you to take this on the road to show the rest of the world what this performance was like?
Well, I think I'd always have the, as much as it was something that I'd always wanted to do, this one-off performance, because I'd never really done anything like it before. I think it was also very much a kind of a bit of a test to see if I could actually make it work. Doing a live show exclusively with computers, working with computers live, I know is a very, very nerve-wracking experience. Having worked with the Fairlights back with Yes in the early 1980s, and cards would fall out of the machine and all sorts of things would go wrong. So nothing's changed. The computers are still. It's a risky gadget to take on the road. So in many ways, I wanted to. It was more of a kind of a test, to see whether it would actually work. And I think it works as a composite. As regards the future, I'd certainly like to have the opportunity to do some selected solo shows in the future. And I think also it helped me for the Asia Across America tour. It helped me prepare for that in some ways as well, because again I was using a laptop on that tour, so using a lot of these virtual instruments I was discussing earlier. It was really enabled me to try that out on a kind of a dry run, if you like.
Well, you brought up an interesting point, and that is that it is not usual for you to ever be performing on your own. What was the basic differences that you noticed when you don't have other musicians performing with you as opposed to the solo material you were doing?
I think it's a lot more nerve-wracking because you are very exposed. I didn't really realise how exposed you are as a solo artist.
If something goes wrong, there's nobody else to blame.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've always hid behind banks of keyboards. That's been my excuse in the past. I've been doing it for 25 years, you know. All of a sudden you're there, and people are listening and they want to know, is it gonna come off? So yeah, I mean, it must be very, very hard to be a solo artist. That's all I can think is that, particularly a vocalist, where my only real fear is that a piece of equipment isn't going to work. You know, if you're a vocalist performing as a solo artist and you're having a problem with your voice, I can imagine that must be one of the most frightening experiences around, because I know it has affected people in the past, like a girl from Catatonia, just used to get total locked stage fright, just being in front of people.
Bob Dylan used to perform with his back to the audience because
Yeah,
he couldn't deal with it.
there's always one.
Well, Geoff, thank you very much for bringing this performance to the Armada. I know that all the fans out there really appreciate it, and we hope to hear much more from you and from Asia in the very near future.
I'm sure you'll be hearing a lot more of us. Thank you.